Today, my guest is Dr. Rosita Cortizo. Rosita is originally from Panama City, Panama, in South America, and currently works as a multicultural, bilingual, prenatal, and perinatal clinical psychologist for women's health services in San Diego, California. Dr. Cortizo has worked to promote health for pregnant women with multiple diagnoses, traumatic stress, dissociative processes, and relational crises for more than 30 years. She holds licenses as both a clinical psychologist and a marriage and family therapist, and earned her master's in psychology with a specialty in chemical dependency. She's EMDRIA certified, an approved EMDR consultant, and she served as the 2021 International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation president. You can learn more about her and her work at thecalmingwomb.com and at rositacortizo.com. Rosita and I have connected over the past few years through our work with the ISSTD Executive Committee and Board of Directors. In 2021, she led the organization with grace and calm and care, and I'm so grateful to be able to follow in her footsteps. I'm excited for you to hear from her directly and to learn about her work with pregnant moms and families. So let's welcome Rosita to the show. Hello, and welcome to the How We Can Heal podcast. My name is Lisa Danylchuk, and I created this podcast to share deep conversations that encourage us to move through life's toughest circumstances. Let's get talking about how we can heal. Yay, Rosita! I'm so happy to have you here.
Hi, thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me here, Lisa.
Yeah, I'm good, and I'm glad we've got Penelope joining for those watching on video. We've got a little feline presence in the background along with some flowers. I always appreciate that whenever we talk, Rosita, that you have flowers or singing bowls or something really like grounding or soothing in your background. I use those things in meetings. I look over your shoulder and I'm like, oh, that's better.
Well, thank you for noticing. I love flowers and it always brings me back to earth. And yeah, you're right, grounding and relaxation, thinking of something pleasant and pleasurable, and also give that feeling to to other people around.
Even through Zoom, right? We can do
Yes,
those
even
things.
through snow. Yes,
So I want
absolutely.
to start by asking just a little bit more about you and your history. I know you do a ton of clinical work, and I know you've had articles out and interviews and things like that. But I want to just give a chance for people listening to kind of get to know, and I want to learn because we haven't always had a chance to explore all this stuff together. Like, how'd you get into doing trauma work?
Well, it's an interesting path. I was working in something totally unrelated to psychology, but um, because of my upbringing and education, it was always fostered that we did some kind of volunteer work. So I was doing volunteer work in this private clinic that treated addictions.
Mm.
And then from there, they sent me to represent Panama in Canada, and I loved everything I heard. So I end up really joining the field through service and through just kind of curiosity and of what would make these incredible people hooked on substances that were killing them, and
Wow.
what was the purpose. And I got really close to a lot of those folks that I supported. And anyway, so then that one thing led to another.
You were volunteering. You went to represent Panama on a trip to Canada or while you were in Canada, and that was working with substance abuse?
Yes. And those days, addictions was seen as a problem, like a group that was creating problems for another group. It wasn't seen as a trauma driven afflicted individuals. So after I came back from Canada, I just realized this was a field that I wanted to explore. So I came to the States for my graduate school. When I finished my master's in chemical dependency, then I end up working with pregnant women. And then it's when the field of trauma start manifesting and showing in the room. But it wasn't at the time trauma, it was just these difficult clients. In my heart, I knew they were not difficult. Something was wrong with that picture. And that's when I started being very adamant and very forceful about supporting this group of people and finding out more, because I felt like we were missing elements of healing for this population.
Absolutely. So how did it translate from substance abuse to working with women in pregnancy? Was there an overlap between, like, were you working with women who are also dealing with substance abuse issues while they were pregnant, or was it more of like a turning point or a gradual transition?
Well, again, when I finished my master's, I wanted to do some volunteer work and see how it all applied in the States before I moved back to Panama, where I'm originally from.
Mhm.
And because my intent was just to come for a year and go right back, or a year and a half, and go right back to work in Panama and work in our crack epidemic.
Mm,
But what happened, and mind you, before I came back to the States, before I started graduate school, I had an internship with the guru of dual diagnosis at the time, which was the psychiatrist that worked in the mental health institution in Panama. And I was his co facilitator in my service work. And so we were running groups under a tree, in a private place. Um, and then, so from all that, we go back to me graduating and doing service work in my first facility. And it was with this group of pregnant women. I never intended to work with women, never intended to work with pregnant women, never intended to work with moms of small children. The
mm.
program was for pregnant women and children up to the age of 4. So that was my first experience 30 years ago with prenatal psychotherapy.
Nice. So you've got some experience, fair to say. You've been around for a minute. So how and when did you start learning about dissociation? Was that clear early on, or was that something you picked up in the middle of the work? When did that happen?
I think that I work with those moms, and then I work in crisis centers, and it didn't occur to me because I kept going in school. I was going through a master's in marriage and family, and along the way, I decided I wanted to get my doctorate in clinical psychology because that would give me more depth. But then, what if I didn't finish? So I decided to finish my MFT and get a license in case. And then, well, when I finished it all, it became clear that some things were missing in the school training.
Yeah.
The books didn't talk about dissociation, it talked about false memories. There were a lot of different things that were not honored. We were not taught, not for lack of willingness, but for lack of, I think, research, understanding, and innovation and curiosity. So it was when I was at the clinic after 2 years of working in that clinic. It must have been like maybe 20 years ago. And I just had this client with horrendous uh, trauma. It was one thing, and I'm going to combine this for because of confidentiality and privacy with a lot of other things, still keeping the the flavor of the dilemma.
Mhm.
So combining few stories into one that are similar um, to protect identity. But this person came with a lot of trauma. I mean, it was one and the other and the other, and I just felt empty-handed.
Mhm.
I just felt like, I had so much willingness, but I had a lot of information, but I didn't have that refined, specific information. And there were things she was remembering, and she didn't know if they were real or not. And I just knew enough to listen to her.
Yeah.
But she was my inspiration.
Yeah. And at what point did you find the ISSTD? Was that around that time or later on?
It was much later. I think it was many years later because it after few years after treating her and many clients like her, I was treating men, women, children, families. I mean, there were a lot of stories that were very similar, and I didn't know about trauma. Still, it wasn't talked the way we're talking right now. That the treatment needs to be phased. That we want to take it slow. None of that was talked about at the time, especially in community clinic in public health. So it was just so rapid, such a volume, such an intensity.
Yeah.
Whatever you were learning in school, it didn't seem to apply to our world, to the world of that community. The amount of repetitive incidents. It wasn't classic textbook cases. It
Yeah.
was completely different. So first of all, I had to orient myself to the work that I was meant to do as the manager of that clinic. In the community where I live, it was different than the community where I lived and the other communities where I had work, even though it was the same population. So it took a while to kind of fall comfortable with that population, be curious and understanding, and then recognize that there were specific things missing. And that's when I got trained in EMDR, and when my supervisor recommended that I joined the DISUC listserv, and from there I learned about the International Society for the Study and Dissociation, the ISSTD, and that's where everything has unfolded so nicely.
Yeah, and I'm so glad to be connected with you through that association. I feel like there's a lot of people I talk to who kind of feel like they're out there alone, sort of ironically floating, floating out there, knowing about dissociation, not really fully connected to a group that gets it. And so it is nice to figure that piece out. I mean, I share with you, I worked in housing developments for a while, and yeah, these young people, they're like 16 years old and they have all these diagnoses and this thick case file, and you're like, can we talk about the things that they've been through? And can we talk about how that might be impacting their ability to pay attention or their feelings about themselves or their mood and their thoughts about life, right? It seems, I think when you have a trauma informed perspective, it makes a lot of sense. But when you don't, and you're just sort of going with check boxes and symptoms or behaviors, it can seem kind of scattered and overwhelming. So you've helped a lot of people, a lot of women in particular. That's one of your specialties. Yeah, working with women before, during, after pregnancy, working with kids and families. What are some common challenges you see in your clinical work these days?
I think when I started to work with the population, what I have seen that was an issue for the mothers to be, or mothers of small children, was transportation in our
Mm.
community. Women wanted the service, they couldn't access the services. After COVID, it really changed because we can talk over the phone. Most of them, a lot of them don't have the technology, but we can make it very simple and easy. I call them on the phone, and if they want, they can come to the clinic. So we have opened up the door to accessing services in ways that we were not able to. I think that um, probably institutional understanding of trauma, it's still a little um, weak. I think that if we were to understand the impact of developmental trauma, we would do a lot more work around pregnant moms and families. And
Yes.
that's the issue for me now, because I have worked with children, I have worked with adults, I have worked with families, and this is finally, it all comes together. You have the mother, the child, the family all in one, and we're missing an opportunity to really do prevention as we're doing treatment, and as we're treating the individual, we can also treat the family. It's a lot that we're missing by not seeing this group of invisible clients.
Hmm. So, for people who maybe don't work with this population or aren't, pregnant women and working in families with families in this way isn't on their radar. Can you spell it out? Like what preventative things do you feel like pregnant women or the people that you see, what are some easy access points of supporting that group, making the group more visible? And even I think we're on the same wavelength here, but even preventing future mental health challenges with children and fostering attachment and things like that. What are some things you've seen work well, or what are some things you wish more clinics, more countries maybe, or organizations could do for pregnant women?
Well, I think this is an exciting point in time because women are becoming more visible, first of all. Then we all have to realize that in exploring ourselves, we would be doing each one of us a great service if we explore how we came into the world.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a painful conversation where we wanted, where we planned. Birth order. Was the adjustment tackled when we were born, or did that go unseen and created siblings rivalry?
Hmm.
All these things are so important when we look at them. I'm sorry, when we look at them, um, it doesn't have to be somebody in treatment. It just starts with everybody just coming to that realization that we have all been there before. Now, the issue that we're having with pregnant moms is that they have so much to do. It's a lot. Mothers have plenty to do. They just don't think. I have chased moms all the way to their cars, carry baby cars and all kind of toys, and pamphlets just to be have a longer conversation because quite frankly, after a first session, moms are really busy and having therapy, it's not a priority. As you
Hmm.
know, when we talk about the Maslow pyramid of needs, therapy, humor, and all these things are very altruistic, but sometimes, and very necessary. But sometimes, when people need food and stability, that doesn't seem to be a priority. So it's creating healing to become a social priority, a priority for pregnant women. I think it's very important. So, how do we do that? How can we get there? We can. One way that I have found very helpful is to create a lot of education and understanding about the importance for the mothers to feel good about themselves. Because if they don't feel good about themselves, they are not going to feel good about connecting with their babies. As a matter of fact, even if they want to, they are not going to connect in ways that they really would love to do or foreseen happening. So
Hmm.
that's the first understanding. And I have crowns all over my office so that they know that they are the queen of the house, queen or princess, whatever they
You
want.
have crowns, you said, all over your
Yes,
office?
yes, I
I
do,
love
and
that. I love that.
it's it's very representative, Lisa, of their place in the life of the children. If they feel good, the kids feel good, and even before they conceive, they can talk to the baby and create that connection. It's one way, but then it comes the ultrasound, and that's a picture and a resemblance to her, or maybe the partner. And then it comes the
Yeah.
element of the baby kicking. So we have when the baby is moving, we have other conversation, but all throughout, those 10 crucial and vital, significant months of womb baby forming, I mean, we can do a lot of work.
So supporting the mom in feeling good about herself, feeling important, supporting people in acknowledging, hey, as this baby's growing, it's still inside a person, the woman who's carrying the baby, but we can start to develop a relationship there from that very beginning. So, I mean, what I hear in that is you're starting to foster a responsive relationship, right? That is one of those bases for secure attachment. And you're also, I mean, speaking of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you're talking about creating an environment, physically speaking, for the developing child that feels positive. I mean, we know that when people feel better about themselves, it's a different internal state, right? So, and it's a different neurobiological state, and it's a different, a whole different physiological imprint. So what you're saying is from that very beginning, we can develop that relationship. We can give a lot of respect and dignity and worth to the woman carrying the child, which then influences the child too. Am I getting that right?
Yes, yes. And all that modeling
Mm.
and interpersonal healing can happen in the room from the time that we meet that mother for the first time, opening the door and saying, I'm so glad to meet you. Can I offer you water? Do you need to go to the restroom before? You see,
Mm.
you're taking care of primary needs. It's subtle, but it's important. When they sit when they go into the office, where do you want to sit? Wherever you want to sit, wherever you feel the most comfortable. This is your place.
Mm.
And then they sit whatever they find. And then they are educated. I'm not answering to anyone's calls because I'm focusing on you. So, of course, with the cells now, with the whole purpose is let's turn our gadgets off so that we're focusing on you. And then, of course, there is the crown. You're so important. You're bringing a little one into the world, and how you feel, it's going to impact how other people feel. Then there is the conversation. Can my anxiety, if I cry, if I have therapy with you, would that affect my baby?
Mm.
And that's a very valid comment, very repetitive. And my question is, I think if something is bothering you and you don't work on that, that's going to affect you now and that's going to affect you later. And it's going to increase probably in how much it affects you and your family. So why don't we tackle that now and reduce it so you don't feel it? And then it's an opportunity to educate moms about stress, about, you know, the baby and how they can talk to the baby, protect the baby. I also, from the first day or second day, I asked them if I can talk to the baby. You see, I asked for permission. Can I talk to the
Mm.
baby? Do you have a name? Do you have a nickname? And it fostered already that connection. The baby, it's already here. The baby, it's not an object. The baby, it's not a package. The baby, it's here. And it's a part of our conversation. We're having family therapy in a way, and everything we do, it's going to affect the baby. So when we have heated discussions, I want to use that and tell them the baby it's probably not as present as it would be when it's delivered, but you still want to pay attention to and keep in mind that when you're having adult discussions, you want the baby to be in a different room, in a protected room where the baby don't
Mm.
get to hear these conversations. And we sometimes talk about that in the context of therapy. When the baby is in the womb, we say, well, could you imagine the baby having a veil, that it's protected and it's not a part of this conversation? Sometimes I even apologize to the baby. I'm so sorry we're talking about these things. They're a little bit difficult. They are not about you. It's about mom, and we're taking care of them. So you see, so the baby, it's already not responsible, and mom learns behaviors that later on, when the baby's little, mom and dad are going to have arguments, or mom and mom, dad and dad, whatever preferences those are. And whatever the adults do, it's not the responsibility of the child, nor it's the child responsible for those.
Hmm. It's so great to start setting and modeling those boundaries when I think for many people, especially early in pregnancy, it feels like an idea, right? It doesn't feel like a reality yet. So you're very much bringing the tangible nature of the young developing person into the room and into the relationship. And I so appreciate that question about, oh, well, what if I have negative feelings come up? What if I get angry? What if I get, and we call those feelings negative, but they're just other feelings, right? They're just feelings. So what if I have a challenging feeling like anger or sadness come up, and is that going to hurt my baby if I feel sad or angry while they're in there? And it makes me think of too, like you talked about the discussions, whether the baby's inside a woman's body or outside a person's body. They're there, and it's important to factor that in. So, if we were having a conversation, if someone was feeling angry or sad, and the child was in the house, well, it's not about like never feeling sad or never feeling angry. It's more about learning how to move through those things, right? So it's a different biology, obviously, when someone's carrying a child internally. But I really appreciate that question because I can imagine lots of people feel protective, right? Feel like I don't want to hurt my baby by being mad. So I kind of see two sides of it. One is like, okay, let's learn some self regulation for stress or not let anger snowball or skyrocket. But then let's also attend to your feelings so that they're not just still there, tucked into the background, hiding somewhere in your shoulders or coming out over the long term. Let's address it so that you can move through it so that you can keep supporting this person that's developing within you.
Yes, and often there it's the issue of, isn't that selfish? That I focus on myself, and my question is no. If you are okay, the children are going to be okay, because it's not that you're going to forget about them, it's that you're going to balance that. You cannot offer them what you don't have. So yes, learning how to breathe, learning how to self-soothe, drinking water to hydrate and release some stress. I mean, all these things are so important, and I think that moms need to learn them so that they can teach their kids. Even, there are simple techniques that they can do for themselves, and then they can practice with their children, like blowing bubbles. I mean, like, you can breathe, you can blow bubbles, and then you can breathe again, and then you can blow bubbles. It's a lot of fun. The kids get a kick out of it, and mom gets to relax too.
Yes. So what in a mom's words would they be looking for if they're coming to see you? Do you have a sense of how do people tend to express an emotional need, or what kind of healing are they seeking or looking for when they come and find you?
This is the exciting element, I think, in therapy, that everybody comes with a little bit of a different need. So everybody's so different. Even though, it seems like things fall into a category, in my somatic countertransference, it doesn't. Everybody, it's just so unique, has such a authentic, different need. And so, but I would say that overall, a lot of moms would want to have education. So, in utero developmental guidance have become a really, eventually, I created a model because I figure, it's the calming womb family therapy model, because I felt like I needed to conceptualize the work that I'm doing with these families. And then it became something that I can easily share with other people, in that it can be elements that they can add on to their own work. But I find very useful to do education of the baby in the womb, and mom's education of herself and her needs as the baby is growing. We explore projections. A lot of moms would have wanted maybe a boy and they're getting a girl, or they wanted a girl, they wanted a boy. And a lot of things come up in the room when they go, and they were not aware, and that's the dissociative component. Moms go into a gyne office and they are having a pelvic exam, and they don't even know why they're having the reactions they are having. A lot of fear, discomfort, don't want, so a lot of terror, nightmares. So these things become a part of the work. What are these things? What's the meaning of all of that for a mom? And it's different for every mom.
Yeah. And it sounds like for some people, there might be moments where the pregnancy itself or the procedures around it are triggering things that maybe they do remember, things that perhaps they don't remember. And that can be really overwhelming and confusing amidst all of the adaptations of parenthood or new parenthood. And so you provide the space and the understanding to support people through if they are feeling triggered, or if they do have a memory come up, or if they are wondering, whoa, what's going on here? You can kind of provide that space and support.
Yes, and the interesting thing is, I have been in this community clinic for 20 years. So I have seen a lot of clients since they are teenagers. So I have seen some of them having children. So I know their issues. And, so when they get pregnant, I mean, it's good because, we can prevent postpartum depression. We can talk about it. We can, mom can be prepared, and it doesn't take away all the problems, but it sure makes the mother feel more informed about herself.
I just love hearing that you have been in this clinic for 20 years because I think of the clinics I've worked in, and most of them it was soon after I finished my bachelor's and, or during my master's or, 2, 3 years tops. Like, and there's such a loss in, I think, the turnover. And when you just talk about, oh, I've been in this clinic 20 years, I knew this person, I watched them grow up, or I've known them since they were a teenager, and I can support them not just in a general sense, but in a very responsive and unique way, right? Like you have that capacity, having known someone, to get a sense of like, well, how would this impact this person, or what is their history, and what are they bringing, and what are their unique personality quirks. And you have, like, to have some relationship before someone's going through something, especially if someone gets pregnant and then they triggered and get a memory of some early traumatic experience. To have someone you've known for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that's such an incredible resource. So it just makes me smile hearing you say that you've been there. And I hear and I know just from listening to you over the years how much passion you have for this. And I think you and your people, your clients, are very lucky.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I think the years went by really fast, I have to say, but also, I mean, it gave me some kind of intuitive satisfaction to feel like I could tell the women, if you need to come back, the doors are open. And part of my policy is that if you need to come back for whatever issues later on, you can always come back, no questions asked, and also being able to treat pregnant women even when they claim when we're not taking any more clients. I think it's so nice to be able to offer that and to know that once the kids are older, they can come back. I have treated moms that felt really good and then things happened 4 years down the road and they came back for services and I was still in the clinic. Sometimes you question yourself, like, oh my God. But, overall, I think that the proof it's in the pudding, you know. I mean, it tastes pretty good every time, when somebody feels like they can contact and they can, continue with their and there is some kind of attachment that has been repaired through the continuity of the relationship.
Yes, 100%. So you're providing that, I mean, just your presence in that way. Is there anything else you feel like you are cultivating with clients? Is there self-compassion, self-care, healthy attachment? I kind of hear a mix of that in there. And maybe your model informs this. And I'm just wondering if there's something specific or repetitive you feel like you're providing.
I think because we come, I don't know if it's a group of the clients that I'm treating, but there are a lot of they came from homes where the parents were very young. So the parents were growing and the kids grew with their parents. So they were, there wasn't a lot of solid parenting. So part of the work is provide some reparenting. And with that comes shame. So I have seen that a lot of what I'm focusing on is self-compassion and curiosity. So the word curiosity came to my reach my ears in a different way when Richard Sheffet's psychiatrist, he mentioned that concept in such a lovely way that it just resonated with me profoundly. And I think that in treating moms, I mean, it's the one thing that it seems to be to remove. shame when we are like, well, let's be curious about that and let's just embrace it. Let's just embrace it. Let's be curious. Let's just not have judgment about that. And while we're doing that, let's practice self-compassion. So those are the things that I think that that move a lot of the work that I do.
So, what would you say then if there's someone listening, perhaps they're pregnant, perhaps they're a parent or a mom? What would you say to someone who's really struggling right now? I mean, we've been through a few years of pandemic at this point. I think it's fair to say in the last handful of years, a lot of people have had a pretty tough time. What would you say to someone who's struggling right now?
Things will change. Things will get better. Just keep working and taking care of yourself. It's almost like you paddle, 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 paddle in a bucket of milk, and eventually it becomes cream, and then you slide out of it. Also, another image that I like is that things get a little worse before they get a little better because you come to an understanding, and then there is some grief. But it's like healing. It's like going up a mountain, and the the taller the mountain, the nicer the view when you look back. So, meaning that if you work hard, eventually you're going to get results. There is always a perception that things are better in the neighbor's yard, that the grass is greener somewhere else. And I always tell the clients, no, 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 no. The grass, it's always greener where you're at, because that's the grass you have. And we're gonna focus on that grass. Don't worry about the neighbors, because we don't know if there are worms underneath. We don't know what's going on with that grass. Your grass is what we have and we can attend to right now.
Yeah. So that sort of refocuses energy in the present moment. And, I love the expression compare and despair because I think we can really, oh, but this other person has this and this other person looks so happy or this other person seems to have it all. And it's like, seems to, we don't know what's going on over there, but it's really ends up being kind of a waste of energy because we're creating this story in our minds, in our head that isn't really based in anything other than our projection, right?
Yes, yes, and those projections, can certainly get in the way sometimes. You know. Also,
Ooh, can they?
one thing that is really interesting, and Lisa, you have probably heard a lot about that too. It's that what happens in the room. That stickiness that happened from time to time in the room, and
Yeah.
who we get to represent at different times in therapy. And boy, it it gives our job a little bit of an importance, I would say, you know, to be able to take the
Yeah.
heat and to be able to explore that heat.
Yeah. It's challenging sometimes. And so, I mean, another question I would have for you is I think a lot of folks listening are in different healing professions, yoga, mental health, health in general. And I know throughout the pandemic, mental health providers have kind of had a rough time because, they transition from being with people to being online and have, a lot more demand for services, have the impacts of the pandemic, the grief, the anxiety, the amplification of, whatever is happening. And then they're going through the same thing at the same time in a different way. So, what would you say to providers right now, mental health or general health providers who are maybe feeling a little bit burnt out or who are feeling like they're having a hard time?
And such a good point, Lisa, because I think that we're set up to work in crisis. So, also in a clinic, I don't know about other clinics, but ours thrive. The behavioral health department just became really, really busy. And while other parts of the clinic, they were reorganizing, we were totally organized for to do what we have been doing. So we were at full capacity, like 120, 115, 110 productivity, which it's unheard of. Uh, so it
Yeah.
it almost double up. So, and we're still functioning pretty highly, I think. So it became really important for us to meet regularly as a group. So I think that having um, in social groups, connecting with family and friends, making an effort to maybe go and learn a new kind of hobby or craft. I mean, but becoming more sociable, going out, making the extra effort to go out in nature, to call family, friends. I think that it's very important. It certainly was very important. You know, that
I'm thinking of the flower pictures that you sent me the other day. Like, just those walks in nature and being really present to I always get the little, tea bag wisdom, you get a cup of tea and there's, like, a quote on it that says something like, "Flowers are the," um I'm gonna forget it now, I'm gonna totally mess it up, but, like, flowers are this miracle of the earth, right? Like, they're so amazing when you really stop and it's springtime. We're both in California right now. It's springtime in California right now. You go around and it's like, wow, that's incredible. And so something I think then of the emotion of awe, right? And being able to just be in awe of those simple things, be connected to nature, be connected to each other. Yeah, I agree. I think all of that is just super important. And I know I get a lot of energy out of just being with people. We don't even have to be talking necessarily. Like we can just be hanging out. And I get a ton of relief from being in the outdoors and just, you know, walking or running or climbing one of those mountains, like all of that stuff is really healing for me.
Well, and I think it's very important what we were talking about earlier about telling the mothers to take care of themselves so they can take care of their kids. Well, we need to take care of ourselves if we're going to be effective in taking care of other people, because taking care of our energy, of our creativity, networking, going to seminars. I mean, I love going to the ISSTD seminars because you get new information, but you also get, aside from the novelty of the information, you get that contact with other professionals, the high energy. I mean, everybody seems to be vibrating so high. You come back and you have that energy for a couple of weeks. I mean, it's pretty powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a very tangible feeling to that group energy. So I love the full circleness of, yeah, as if you're a mother or you're a therapist or you're a parent or you're a yoga teacher helping people, it's you gotta, I mean, there's so many ways we say this and so many analogies we use to try to talk about self-care in this way, but it is really important to nourish yourself. One of the ones I love is you've got to nourish to flourish, right? You have to nourish yourself, like the flowers behind you, you got to put water in there. A lot of plants need soil and sun. Like we're not that different. We might be a little more complex with our needs, but we need something in and space and in order to flourish ourselves.
Yes, very true.
So I know you're just chock full of wisdom, so I'm curious, if there's anything else you would say to people who are facing trauma right now, like what would you want them to know, to feel, to believe about themselves? I think a lot of times people don't even know they're facing trauma, but if someone's like really in the thick of maybe grief after the pandemic, a recent loss, or some other kind of trauma they're working with, what would you say to them?
I would say do not give up and reach out to somebody that has what you would want, because then you would get it. And I think it's important not to give up. I have been a witness. I have worked with people for sometimes for a long time that felt really, really bad about their time, their lives, and we worked together really hard. These clients work very, very hard and against their own willingness to continue. And over time, they were able to see that light at the end of the tunnel. It one day they came back and they were better. And it wasn't one thing that happened. I think it was the buildup of wisdom and courage and their capacity to be loyal to to themselves and to be seen and to be heard and to be valued and to then know that one day things would shift and to trust that somebody was holding the flashlight in the right direction.
Yeah. So, what gives you hope at this point in the world and in life?
I think that very indirectly, it's not meant to happen, but seeing people getting better gives me hope in the work that I do because sometimes it's really hard to, especially when I start working in behavioral health. I transitioned from the prenatal um, program to behavioral health to work with the same clients, but to do it from a different department. And I started with a lot of new clients. It was such an amount of work and so difficult because everybody was so upset and sad and in such a difficult place. And it's so interesting because that wave over time and different people at different times, it's like surfing. Some people were able to catch a wave and some people got the wave later. But everybody seemed to have been able to benefit from the swim, from the water, from the therapy. And that has been of value to me. Even if a client has decided that they don't want to continue the work at that time, that's very empowering because they know best and they know if they were to come back, they can come back to see me, or they could go back to other resources that are provided. So all that is very hopeful to me. To see people feeling better, getting better. Babies have been very healing. To see those babies, mom have been crying for the whole 10 months, unconsolable, and then a baby is born laughing and can't stop laughing and giggling throughout. It's like, wow, where did that come from? So it's that mom was able to release everything to me in that room, and that so that the baby was left untouched with different energy. Whatever it was, it seems to be different and it seems to be working. And so all of that, it's great energy.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is really powerful. It's intercepting intergenerational trauma, really, is what I hear, right? Like you're clearing things, addressing them, moving them through so that the baby's born not needing to carry that or not needing to figure that out later in life. So that's really significant. That's huge for everyone, and it's very hopeful, right? To think of, I mean, I just feel like babies are magic. I love babies. Like, I just like, I just want to touch them and squeeze them and give them all the love and protect them forever. But to know that you're a part of a process and to witness the work that your clients are doing, to the emotional work, the, you know, kind of dedicating the space to healing, and then seeing an actual human being born that doesn't really have to carry some of that emotional stress or impact of trauma, that's just huge.
I just also think that education has been very important. Education is very helpful to me because I find new things to collaborate with people. So when somebody says I want to end it all, I understand different messages of what that it's trying to convey to me, and the adaptation of that message of I want to find out with you a different life, or I want to find a different life so I can make more sense out of what I'm doing now. So I think education has been monumental, and it's a source of inspiration. Nature, it's a source of inspiration, and friends around the world are and family are great inspirations as well. Having faith, I think faith has been inspiration.
Having faith.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I might have shared this in another one of the podcasts here, but sometimes just the simple mantra or thought to repeat, just saying, I have faith. Like, a lot of times we end up in conversations about religion or spirituality or what does that mean? What do you have faith in? And I think sometimes we can also just put a period on the end of that sentence, like, I just have faith, right? And we don't have to make it too complicated. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful contribution too. So, Rosita, if
Yes, sometimes faith in the universe.
right. Faith in the universe. Faith in something.
Bigger than ourselves. Yeah.
So I'm curious, what's next for you? I know you've written a little bit about this, the protocol that you use. How can people connect with your work, learn from all of your experience? What are some resources you have out there, and how can people find you?
Well, they can go into my website, Rosita Cortizo.com, or they can email me at R for Rosita, E for Ernest, recortizo@gmail.com. The next step would be to create a training. I'm creating a training right now for the ISSTD with this information. I think that'd be helpful. I mean, ideally, I would love to be like a hand for all the moms. Like, I would love to create a program where moms that need babysitters can find somebody that can help them with the babies. I don't think that I'm going to get to that in this lifetime, but it would be really wonderful to be able to be kind of a grandmother Earth for a lot of babies. So
I can see that happening. I can 100% see that happening. And I know you've developed this model, and you have a lot of wisdom to offer. So thank you for spending your time here today. Maybe we can have you back to kind of walk us through the model that you developed next time. I would love to get more into that. I know it's a little more focused and clinical, but I love that stuff.
thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me, for thinking that this work matters. And I love your podcast. I have heard it, and I really believe in all the information you're putting out there. And so thank you for all you do.
Yay. Thank you, Rosita. And yes, it does matter. It matters so much. Everything you're doing, all the people you're working with, they just matter so much. So I'm so glad you're doing it. Thanks, Rosita. Thanks so much for listening. My hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling supported and like you have a place to come to find the hope and inspiration you need to take your next small step forward. I do want to make sure it's clear that this podcast isn't offering any prescriptions. It's not advice or any kind of diagnosis. Your decisions are in your hands, and we encourage you to consult with any relevant healthcare professionals you may need to support you through your unique path of healing. For more information and resources, please visit my website, howwecanheal.com. There, you'll find tons of helpful resources and the full transcript of each show. You can also click the podcast menu to submit requests for upcoming topics and guests. Before we wrap, I want to send thanks to our guests today, to Christine O'Donnell and Celine Baumgartner of Bright-Sided Podcasting, and to everyone who helped support this podcast, directly and indirectly. Alex, thanks for taking the dogs out while I record. I'd also like to give a shout out to my brother Matt. He passed away in 2002. He wrote this music and recorded it, and it makes my heart so happy to share it with you now.